We are looking at Parshas VaYetzei. Our subject, for those who pay attention to those things, is Perchance to dream. And we will get underway and consider tonight the famous dream of Yaakov on his way into exile. So we're looking at Parshas VaYetzei, page 144, if you're with me in the Stone Chumash, but whatever Chumash you have, you'll find it at the beginning of, not beginning actually, but in chapter 28, Pasuk Yud. So the Parsha begins, VaYetzei Yaakov mi Be'er Shava vayelech Charana. He left Beersheba, he headed towards Haran. Much has been said about that pasuk, haTurim as well. But what I want to focus on is the next pasuk. Vayifga b'makom vayalen sham kiva hashemesh. He encountered the place. He spent the night there. Vayalen is an expression of staying overnight, usually sleeping overnight. The Hebrew word for hotel is a beit malon, and it comes from that word. Vayalen sham. Kiva HaShemesh, because the sun had set. When he lay down in that place. Then it says Vayachalom, etc. I just want to comment on this introductory pasuk about Kiva HaShemesh. The words Kiva HaShemesh, it's a slightly unusual way to describe the setting of the sun. We have a word in Hebrew for setting of the sun, that is shki'ah, shki'at hachama. Literally, lishkoa is to sink in. The sun, so to speak, declines towards the western horizon, and gradually it sinks below the horizon. That's how we perceive the setting of the sun. And the reason for that, of course, is that the Earth rotates on its axis, and it rotates actually at a very fast speed, but we're not conscious of the fast speed. What we are aware of is that the sun gradually inclines towards the western horizon, and even once it touches the horizon, it doesn't sink below the horizon in a heartbeat. It doesn't go from daylight to night, as I said, in a flash. It happens over the course of a few minutes, depending on where you are in the world, whether you are far from the equator or near the equator. But even on the equator, it doesn't happen in an instant. So the words Kiva HaShemesh imply something unusual. The sun had arrived, so to speak. The sun arrived at its destination, namely retiring for the night, quickly, unnaturally. And Rashi says that Hashem caused the sun to set prematurely so that Yaakov would be constrained to spend the night there, because in those days it wasn't practical or safe to travel that night. Actually, we find in next week's Parsha, when Yaakov is out and about at night, he is attacked by an assailant in next week's Parsha. So it was the norm that if you travel during daylight, once it gets dark, you've got to hit the hay. And he did not have a beit malon. He did not have even a village or something to go into the local Holiday Inn or anything like that. So he had to make his bed for the night. So this is already, of course, familiar. haTurim observes that the words Kiva HaShemesh, the Roshei Tevos, the first letters of those three words, Kiva HaShemesh, because the sun had set, spell out the word kava, chaf beis hey. Kava is to extinguish. And the implication is that Hashem extinguished the light, just like you can have a light in a room. You turn off the light and it goes from illumination to darkness in a moment. Even if you have in earlier times a lantern, you extinguish the lantern, now it's dark. So Hashem, so to speak, extinguished the sun, because that's the remez, Kiva HaShemesh. I think, Baal Turim doesn't mention this, but I think the words Kiva also hint to that. It's almost like a pun, and we do find quite a few puns in the Torah, actually. So it could be when the Torah says Kiva Hashem, it means to allude, to hint to that expression, as if Hashem had extinguished the sun at that time. But the point is that the circumstances that necessitated Yaakov to spend the night were unusual. And I'm sure that Yaakov himself would have been aware that the sun was high in the sky or inclining towards the western horizon, and then suddenly the sun set like unnaturally quickly. He presumably would have been very much alert to that, and I'm just speculating, he would have anticipated there's a reason for this. It's an unnatural event. And even though Hashem didn't, so to speak, alert him to it initially, but that event itself probably tipped him off that there is some divine intervention in my program. And of course, the Torah describes how he slept and he had a very consequential prophetic dream. Just want to mention one other thing. This phenomenon about the sun setting quickly, so it's not mentioned in the Torah explicitly. It is implied, and even the words "vayifga b'makom," he confronted the place. Article says he encountered the place, but we find the word lifgoa is almost to strike or to hit. It's like he ran up against the place unexpectedly. It was dark, and he had to make his bed for the night there. That phenomenon already alludes to great things that are in store for his dream, and we're going to analyze that a little bit in just a few minutes. But what I want to also point out is that Yaakov is in his way now into exile. He has left Beersheba. He's going towards Haran. Of course, there's a well-known tradition that he had an extended detour in the yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever, which actually we're going to speak about on Shabbos a little bit, but it's not for now. But the point is, wherever he went, whether he went right away to Haran, which the Torah implies, or whether he had an extended detour somewhere else, he has gone into exile. He's fleeing from the wrath of his brother, and his brother's stated intention or aspiration to kill him. So Yaakov is on a journey to his destiny, and he embodies, he personifies the Jewish people collectively. So therefore, this is going to be a dream that he'll have, which has connotations for exile and for redemption as well. You have the famous comment of Ramban, how he slept and he saw the angels going up and going down. How many rungs did they ascend? It wasn't like a ladder you may have in your loft or in your garage, about whatever it is, 6 or 8 rungs, but this was a ladder with hundreds of rungs, and they symbolize the different experiences of exile. So there is exile, but there is redemption as well. So here's an interesting thing. It's really just by way of intro to our subject for tonight, but because Baal HaTurim does draw attention to it, I just want to elaborate a little bit more. There is a famous passage, I think it's in Yerushalmi, that says that certain of the Tanaim were traveling. They were on the road early in the morning. It was before dawn. Perhaps it was this time of year when the sun rises quite late. And these rabbis were up before sunrise and before dawn. And as they were walking on the way, and it was night, it wasn't yet dawn, they began to see the first rays of light. The sun wasn't yet visible, but the eastern horizon began gradually to get a little bit lighter. And one of them said, I forget which one it was, I looked it up actually, but that's not that important exactly which Tana it was. He said, Kachi Geulasan Shel Yisrael, Kima Kima. Kima with a kuf and an ayin is an expression of a little bit at a time. Kima, kima, gradually. This is the nature of the redemption. Kachi gu'ulasan shel Yisrael. The darkness of exile is replaced with the light of day, the light of redemption, gradually, incrementally. Kima, kima. Now, you might consider this to be just a symbolic turn of phrase. Perhaps it was almost an offhand comment. Perhaps they were thinking about Geula. They were living in the times of the Roman persecution, and no doubt, the Messianic advent was not far from their thoughts. But this passage has been elevated in the thought of the religious Zionists of the last 100 years and more, really, 150 years or so, to a position of great prominence, looking to that imagery as a paradigm for the messianic process and for the Gula, for the redemption. Now, you might think that that is not extraordinary, but actually it represents the notion that redemption will be a gradual process, which stands in contrast to the imagery that we find in many places that Mashiach can come at any time, possibly, perhaps even probably in an unexpected way. And when things are very dark, that's when the redemption will be at hand, and it will be a transformation that might be very startling and astonishingly quick and of a miraculous nature. That is actually the paradigm for Mashiach. uh, like the notion that when the Jewish people are worthy, then Mashiach will come, immediately in a heartbeat, as we said. And this passage that I just mentioned, Kima Kima Kachi Gulasan Shel Yisrael, suggests redemption through human agency. That's why I say it is a passage that is very popular in the religious Zionist community, who look to the human endeavor, whether the return to the land of Israel, the building up the land of Israel, the establishment of a Jewish state in the land of Israel. These are stages, these are steps, and it's not necessarily a straight line. There are setbacks as well. But the idea that this is the nature of redemption. I mean, when the sun starts to rise, I don't think it ever has a setback, by the way. So in that sense, perhaps the analogy is not absolute. But in any case, that is the Kima Kima. And this example, I'm not saying it refutes it, but this example is closer to the classic paradigm. The sun will suddenly set, even though, as I said, that is the symbol of going into exile. But the departure from exile, the redemption from exile, perhaps will be very quickly, very astonishingly quickly as well. But this kima kima, gradually, incrementally, is another perspective, another possibility. I'll leave it for you to ponder whether one or the other appears to you to be more compelling or more likely. Hopefully, we will find out sometime soon. Okay, I want to continue with the next pasuk. This is just really by way of intro, because what I really want to focus on in the next 20 minutes we have together is really just the next pasuk in pasuk Yud Beis. Vayachalom. Verse 12. Vayachalom, and he dreamt. V'hinei sulam mutzav arza v'rosho magia hashamayma. And behold, a ladder is fixed in the ground, and its head, the top of the ladder, reaches towards the heavens. V'hinei malachei Elohim olim v'yardim bo, and angels of God are ascending and descending upon it. And the Torah goes on to say, Hashem nitzav alav. Hashem is in the dream, in the prophetic dream, is like standing, so to speak. I don't think God actually stands. It's an anthropomorphism. Nitzav alav is standing above him, maybe above the ladder, whatever it might be. But actually, we've read enough for us to analyze right now. And especially, I want to share with you a few different approaches. And I've selected them because he has even more, but I've selected the ones which I think are most fascinating, on the word sulam. So the first thing he says is the word sulam, the way it's spelled here in the Torah. Take a close look. It's spelled samech lamed mem. It means it's chaser, because usually if I were to write the word sulam, I would spell it samech vav lamed mem, in which the vav represents the vowel. So it's sulam with a vav. But here it's spelled in the Torah without the vav. Now we will see that haTurim, for the purposes of the drash, interprets it in both ways. Sometimes he works with the spelling as it appears in the Torah, with chaser without the vav, but he also has some remazim, as we'll see shortly, that incorporate the vav as well, which is how the word is pronounced and how the word would normally be spelt, even though here it is spelled without the vav. So he says the word sulam, the way it's spelled here without the vav, has gematria 130. Samach is 60, lamed is 30, mem is 40, 130. He says that is the same gematria as the words zeh kisei hakavod. That this ladder leads not just to an attic or to the second or third floor on a building, which firemen may want to enter to rescue a kitten or something like that, or whatever it might be, but rather this sulam leads, it sort of is a means of ascent to the Kisei HaKavod, Zeh Kisei HaKavod. So with that in mind, we already based on that remez, we can anticipate that this ladder is going to be a very rich symbol. In fact, I would like to suggest the ladder in the dream of Yaakov is one of the most versatile and well-known symbols in all of the Torah literature. And the ladder, as we'll see shortly, lends itself to symbolic interpretations, many of them of which we'll mention some selections. So he then adds that the word sulam, the way it is usually spelled with a vav, is gematria 136, because obviously the vav adds the 6. He says that is the same as the gematria of the word kol. Kol with a kuf, kol meaning voice. And he says that there's a remez here. Yaakov is sleeping. Yaakov is beholding in a prophetic vision, in the prophetic dream, the ladder, which ascends, as we've said, up to heaven. The malachim, the angels, are going up and down. So because the word sulam has the gematria of the word kol, says Bal haTurim, it alludes to the fact that the sulam, symbolically, metaphorically, is the means by which the voice of the tzaddikim, the prayers of the righteous, ascend to Shamayim through the agency, again, metaphorically, of the malachim. Now, we don't genuinely need the malachim to address our prayers to Hashem, and we're very conscious that we do not address our prayers to the malachim. But in terms of the symbolism or the imagery or the metaphor, the malachim are the bearers of the prayers. The malachim, so to speak, are the ones who array the prayers of Israel before the divine throne in the divine presence. So when it says Malachelim Olim V'Yodimbo, the angels of God ascend, it means that they ascend in order to array, to present the prayers of the tzaddikim, or whoever it may be. I'm sure Hashem listens to the prayers of those who are not tzaddikim as well, if a prayer is heartfelt. So that kol, kuf lamed vav, gematria sulam, is the sulam is the metaphor for the way that the prayers ascend to Shamayim, ad lekisei hakavod, in accordance with the first remez that we already mentioned just now. Ze kisei hakavod, sulam without the vav is gematria ze kisei hakavod. So the prayers ascend, so to speak, unto the kisei hakavod. He adds on something further though. The word sulam, spelled again with the vav, 136, is the same gematria as mammon. The same gematria as mammon. Mammon is mem, vav nun. So mem is 40. Another mem, it makes it 80. The nun, I just find it easier to do the math that way, is 50 is 130, and then the vav is 136. Mammon, of course, is money. Gam, he says, also oni. Oni is poverty. So the sulam, the ladder, and of course a ladder by its nature is a means of ascent and a means of descent. A person might use a ladder to climb up somewhere, or you may use it to climb down, or he may use it for both. He uses it to climb up and he climbs down as well. Of course, if you live in the loft, then you use the ladder to climb up. And when you wake up in the morning, perhaps you use the ladder to climb down. But the point is that the ladder is the function of the ladder is to progress. No one builds a ladder with the expectation that someone is going to stand on the ladder. A person ascends or descends. The ladder is a means to get somewhere. Of course, if you need to paint a wall in a high place, you might stand on the ladder for a little while. But the classic functionality of a ladder is to ascend, and certainly these angels are ascending. Says the Bal haTurim, this is a remez to the pasuk in Tehillim. It's chapter 75, verse 8. If you want to make a note of it, look it up. The pasuk says, "Ki Elohim yishpot," because God will judge. Ze yashpil v'ze yarim. One he will bring low, and one he will elevate. So the ladder, which is a means of going up and going down, hints to mammon and oni, to wealth, to acquisition of money, and to poverty. And a person is elevated, or a person is brought low in accordance with the divine will and the divine plan. I would just observe that it's not only one person who is, so to speak, prosperous and is granted financial bounty, and another person who struggles month by month or year by year can be the same person as well. Can be the same person who experiences financial setbacks for reasons fair or foul. A person can lose his money. A person can be restored to good fortune. So that, of course, is all the symbol of the ladder. The ladder is for motion. The ladder is for ascent and descent. And the gematria is mammon and also oni. Says a further remez. He says sulam, this is not a gematria, but rather it is an observation about the letters. Sulam, without the vav, is spelled samech lamed mem. He says it's osios semel. It's the same letters as the word semel. Semel is a symbol. Sounds quite similar to the English word, actually. Semel is a symbol. So says haTurim, this is a remez that Yaakov, again, he is on his way into exile. And although Yaakov spiritually survives his unpleasant encounter, extended encounter with Lavan, his creepy uncle, but the descendants of Yaakov representing the Jewish people collectively, don't always maintain their status, their stature, their religious stature in exile. For that matter, you read the books of the prophets and you see even in the land of Israel, they had plenty of idolatry, plenty of it. But certainly in exile, and that's true even to this very day, we are faced inevitably with many influences, many, not just temptations, but forced conversion and that sort of thing. So says the haTurim that the word semel alludes to the worship of foreign gods, because semel meaning a symbol, it's also a word for a tselem. Semel is like sulam is like selem is like tselem. It sounds like a word game, but it doesn't mean it in a frivolous way. We believe we have a tradition, that is to say, one of the methods of interpretation is if two words sound alike, then that also hints to a shared meaning. I think we mentioned last week a Becca that Eliezer gave to Rivka that 2 weeks ago it was actually in Parasha. He gave her I think it was a nose ring that weighed a Becca, and I said maybe the word Becca, which is an unusual word, it means a half shekel, but it's not a common word. In fact, it appears only one other place in the Torah. Maybe it hints to her name was Rebecca, so he gave her Rebecca. Or even in Hebrew, Rivka is again the same, even though it's not spelled exactly the same way. Anyway, that's what haTurim says here, that it alludes to the word tselem. Tselem with it, tzadi has the same similar letters to samech, lamed, mem, sulam. It sounds like Tzadi Lamed Mem Tselem, and he says that he was given a vision that in exile his descendants would worship foreign gods, pagan images. I want to add, though, that Ibn Ezra, who lived well before haTurim, I'm not saying Ibn Ezra was the first to say it, perhaps more research would find it in earlier sources still, but Ibn Ezra says explicitly that he says that the nature of the sulam is to be a semel, meaning that I said a few minutes ago that in my mind the image of the ladder is one of the most compelling and well-known and versatile symbols or metaphors that we have in the Torah. Very well known, the dream of Yaakov and the ladder. But Ibn Ezra says, yes, because the word sulam, the letters sulam have the same letters as the word semel, which means a symbol. So the image of the ladder that he beheld in his dream is intended by the Torah to be a symbol for interpretation. And it can be interpreted in a number of ways, as we have seen with the gematria and also with the letters that hint to the tselem as well. But here's a gematria that Ibn Ezra mentions, even though he says it's derech drash, because Ibn Ezra doesn't go for gematrias so frequently, although, as we know, haTurim does. But haTurim mentions this as well. But Ibn Ezra preceded him by about 200 years. He says sulam without the vav, the way it's spelled here in our parsha, is the same gematria as the word Sinai. Sulam is 130, Sinai also 130. Of course, it alludes to Har Sinai, where the Jewish people received the Torah. So if a ladder is a way of climbing up 6 feet, 8 feet, if you got a long, really tall one, maybe a lot more. But the mountain of Har Sinai, not that as mountains go, it was the most dramatic mountain around. It wasn't the Matterhorn, but still the symbolism of a mountain is a vantage point which is well above the level of the plain or the valley. And Har Sinai, again, although as a mountain it wasn't anything exceptional, but by the dint of the fact it was a mountain, and Moshe communed with Hashem, so to speak, in the heavens at the top of that mountain. And that, of course, is the place for Matan Torah, where Hashem came down, so to speak, min hashamayim, and he gave us the Torah. So the word sulam, the ladder that Yaakov beheld in his dream, alludes also to Har Sinai, to Matan Torah. And of course, it's through the embrace of the Torah that a person can ascend. A person can ascend to the spiritual heights through the study of the Torah, through embracing the Torah, and therefore it's very apposite, very apt that the word sulam in the vision, in the dream of Yaakov, alludes to Har Sinai. There's one other remez in sulam, and then I've got a concluding thought to share, also from haTurim. One last comment about sulam that I want to mention. He says that the word sulam, the letters sulam, samach lamed mem, that you can, as an anagram, it's only 3 letters, but you can form a variety of words in Hebrew which each have meaning. So here's another one of them. Lamed mem samach, lemas. What does the word lemas mean? Vahi lemas oved. It says in the I think in Vayechi, Vahi lemas oved. Lemas means to become a tributary. I don't mean a tributary of a river like the Mississippi River, but rather one who gives tribute, one who is compelled by through taxation or through subjugation to work in order to provide a tribute, essentially a kind of tax, or I guess you would say colonial exploitation, which is very, very politically incorrect, but it was the way of the world for many, many hundreds of years, including in the British Empire. So the various colonies were essentially exploited for their wealth and for other things as well, human capital as well. So that's the word lemas. And I'm sure you know in modern Hebrew, mas, it's also classic Hebrew, mas is tax. So lemas means that the Jewish people in exile will be forced to will become subservient and will be exploited by the rulers, and that was true in biblical times already, where we find excuse me, that the kingdom of Yehuda, the kingdom of Ephraim, and the northern kingdoms, they were always paying tribute and were threatened or dominated by foreign empires, and they were forced themselves to pay tribute. In the Middle Ages, Jews were not just frequently, but almost inevitably subjected to punitive taxes. It's not the time for it right now, but that's partly why the Jews were eventually expelled and exiled from England in 1290, because they had been taxed so mercilessly and in such an extortionate way that they could hardly earn a living any longer, and because they were no longer useful to the crown, so it was King Edward agreed to the agitations of the church to expel the Jews, because they had become so impoverished. Previously, they had been much more successful and much more useful to the crown for that reason. In any case, economic exploitation has a long and ignominious history in terms of the Jewish experience in exile. And he says, haTurim says that this is hinted to in the word sulam, which has the letters lemas, one who is forced to pay tribute. In the 2 minutes we have left, I just want to share with you comments about in the haTurim about the words in the same pasuk that we're working with, mutzav arza v'hi vayachalom v'nei sulam. So the word sulam has been the subject of our analysis tonight. Mutzav arza, Arshel renders it, was set earthward and its top reached heavenward. Mutzav arza. So haTurim has a beautiful interpretation. He says this emphasis, I mean, any ladder by its nature, the feet of the ladder are on the ground. The height of the ladder, meaning its top, may reach the first floor or the second floor or wherever it might be, according to the height. This ladder was, of course, a very special ladder, and in the dream, the top reached the heavens. But the fact that the feet of the ladder were on the ground is not necessary to say that the Torah could have described a ladder, and the top of the ladder reached the heaven. Of course, the feet of the ladder are on the ground. That is to be expected. Vine sulam mutzav arza. Why do we need those words mutzav arza? So he says it alludes to the fact that one who is thrust to the ground, one who is thrown to the ground temporarily, magia hashamayim, he will ascend to the heavens. That a person who suffers a setback or suffers some circumstance in which he feels as if his efforts and his aspirations have been dashed and he's thrown to the ground, magia hashamayim. Like the pasuk says, ki nafalti kamti. Because I fell, therefore I will stand. I will arise because I fell. Any person who expects success without setbacks, without disappointment, without circumstances in which he feels as if his efforts and his hopes have been dashed, that person will surely be disappointed, because success and achievement only comes with challenge and with difficulty. And perhaps that's why that's further remez, says Baal HaTurim, not my own idea, why it says mutzav arza, because it's important to realize that by, as I said, being thrust to the ground, a person can arise and a person can achieve. I'd just like to end with the words, I don't know whether there are any Americans here on this Zoom of my generation. I know we have Ruthie for sure. But there was a radio personality called Casey Kasem, and he did American Top 40 in my misspent youth. I used to listen to it sometimes. And his famous catchphrase was, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. And I think that expression, I don't think he made it up, but it became his catchphrase. It derives, I think, directly from this imagery. Keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars, because it's only by keeping your feet on the ground that you can achieve. But of course, if you only content yourself with staying on ground level, then you'll fall short of your aspirations and what you can achieve. So I think that turn of phrase, that lovely turn of phrase, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars, derives from here. And Casey Kasem popularized it, but I think that Baal HaTurim is alluding to it here in this passage as well. Thank you very much. I wish everybody a wonderful Shabbos.